It was October 1979 when I was finally posted to 12 Air Defense Regiment Royal Artillery in Dortmund, West Germany. It was one of the few times that my dad took an interest in me, instead of work and the pub. One reason I was apprehensive was I'd heard all the rumors about initiation ceremonies, a bit like before you go to senior school, and you hear all the tales about having your head shoved down the toilet. As a NIGNU intake gunner or new in Germany, I'd be fair game until the next bunch arrived, after which it would be my turn to make their lives a misery. It was just the pecking order. In the army, at least in my day, if you were soft you were going to get bullied, so you had to stand up for yourself from day one. If the sweats the senior gunners think you will react and punch back, and you've got a decent punch on you, there's a chance they will move on to the next poor sod. Such is life. I had a bit of a head start. I wasn't a particularly hard kid, but as a schoolboy, I had learned to box at Pat Ryan's Catholic Boxing Club in Barrow. At Bramcote, I had won the regimental junior lightweight title, but I was still apprehensive. Germany was a far cry from my safe little Cumbrian town. In fact, the whole experience was a culture shock to a 17-year-old. This was a foreign land, and in more ways than just having Deutschmarks in your pocket instead of pounds. Not many, by the way. I was earning a weekly wage of around £70 a week, by and large. During that period we were drunk or at work or both. We had a bar in our accommodation selling bottles of Crazy K, a very strong locally brewed lager, at around 60p a piece. We'd get tanked up in the battery bar before going downtown at about 1 AM and getting ripped off by the boxheads. Then we'd stagger back at about 4 AM to get up again 2 hours later. By 8 AM, we'd be driving around in Land Rovers and counting down the seconds till it was time to top our alcohol reserves again. That was pretty much how things went every day, whether you wanted to or not. To be honest, I'd have enjoyed a night off from time to time, but you quickly learn to go with the flow in the army. It's not about being an individual, and that extends to every part of your life. I had to share a room with 5 other lads, so there was no such thing as an early night. It was a simple choice: either get thrown out of bed at 4 in the morning when the lads came back, or go out with them, get shit-faced, and throw some other poor bastard out of his bed when you got back yourself. The pubs were open all night, booze was flowing freely 24/7, and it was dangerous. The very first night I went downtown on the Ale, I saw a dead body lying on the pavement, a blanket draped over it, and a large pool of blood glistening darkly in the lights. People were just walking by as though it wasn't there. I was amazed at their nonchalance. Even the soldiers I was with didn't give it a second glance. It wasn't tea until the next day that I found out the body was that of a British soldier who had been stabbed to death by some drug-crazed Turk in a fight outside a bar. One of our locals was called the Cellar Bar. We'd often head down there to sample the local schnapps and Bratty's German bratwurst sausages, and impress the local Fräuleins with our wit and repartee. I remember one night we were all leaping about to the Sex Pistols and Stiff Little Fingers when a group of German bikers started a scrap with the local punks. Being helpful Brits, we went to the rescue of the punks, who, on our arrival, made good their escape, leaving us in deep shit. The bikers were tooled up with pistols. We later found out they fired CS gas pellets rather than lead bullets, but we weren't to know that at the time, so we made the sort of tactical withdrawal for which the regiment became famous. Outside the club, a dozen or so shiny bikes had been neatly lined up by their proud owners. In the good hit-and-run tradition of the long-range desert group, we opened a few filler caps, booted the bikes over, and someone threw a match at them, making our getaway in a taxi to the sanctuary of our camp as the flames leaped into the sky behind. Rule Britannia. Thinking about it, Germany was nearly as dangerous as Northern Ireland. Leaving a bar one night on my own, I was mugged by 2 Germans wielding bricks. They smashed me over the head and knocked me spark out. I must have been out for a while and came to on the floor, alive but soaked in blood and with a banging headache. I flagged down a cab and went to the medical center, where they put 8 stitches in my scalp. As is routine, the medics phoned the monkeys, the military police, who took me to their HQ, where I was interrogated by 2 overzealous special investigations branch policemen. They shined a light in my face, just like on television, and threatened to ruin my life if I didn't tell them the truth. Who had I been with? What was I up to? Why had I been jumped? It was all a bit bewildering. They seemed to think I'd been involved in something terribly dodgy. Soldiers hated them as everyone hated all the RMP, even though they were a necessary evil. The fact was, I was the victim here, and yet I was being treated as though I was the criminal. Army police don't care about technicalities like that, though they can practically get away with murder. Eventually, they let me go. I hope the 2 boxheads who mugged me spent the 1 ODM wisely. There was lots of fighting with other squaddies too, a lot of it between rival regiments. Units called certain pubs their own, and if you wandered in as a strange face, they would be straight over to ask you what regiment you were with. This would usually lead to a scrap, with fists and the odd boot going in. That was fine. It went with the territory. Violence and the military go hand in hand. Of course, it's supposed to be controlled aggression so that you only fight when the brass say so, but sometimes the pressure valve blows.